Hi everyone, it's Kristan Hawkins. Welcome to this new episode of Explicitly Pro-Life Podcast. I hope everyone is remaining safe and quarantined right now. Today for our podcast, I want to introduce a very special Facebook Live I recorded earlier this week with Ann Schlafly Corey, the president of Eagle Forum and daughter of Phyllis Schlafly, and also Colleen Holcomb, the former executive director and current board member of Eagle Forum. As many of you all know, I've talked about Phyllis before. She's one of my heroes, was one of my mentors when I first started Students for Life of America. She single-handedly stopped the ERA, the Everything Related to Abortion Act, from being ratified into our U.S. Constitution, and is responsible for the Republican Party having a pro-life platform. Many people don't know that about Phyllis. All they hear are the bad things that or the lies, as I should say, that the feminist movement, those who support abortion, tell about her. Well, there's a new TV show that just debuted this week called Mrs. America, and it profiles Phyllis. It profiles her family. Now, not surprisingly, sadly for Hollywood, they never talked to Anne or her brothers about her family, about Phyllis's home life. But Hollywood wrote a script, and there are a lot of inaccuracies going around with this show. And this is a good show in terms of quality. It's a high-quality show. It's great music. A lot of famous actors and actresses are in it. It's going to get a lot of attention. But sadly, a lot of people are going to be duped because they're not going to realize what they're watching is fiction. It's not the truth. It's not the real story about Phyllis, how she launched Eagle Forum, how she managed running her organization and launching this entire movement to stop the ERA, as well as her home life. So I asked Anne and Colleen to get on so we could talk about Phyllis, because we're three women who worked with Phyllis, who obviously knew Phyllis, and talk about the inaccuracies in Mrs. America, and then also talk a little bit about the good things that I saw. I watched the first 3 episodes already, but there are some good things that came out of these episodes of this show that I was kind of surprised that Hollywood was willing to speak so openly about. So I hope you'll listen into this conversation, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. Hi, everyone. It's Kristan Hawkins, and thanks for joining me for this live reaction to Mrs. America, the brand new Hulu show that came out this morning that's featuring the life of one of my heroes and mentors, Phyllis Schlafly. And, you know, I wanted to invite on some folks who knew Phyllis well, so we could kind of today go through the first 3 episodes that were released this morning, what we've been able to watch, and our reactions to them, because it was what most folks don't know is Phyllis Schlafly single-handedly stopped the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, the Everything Related to Abortion Act, from becoming a constitutional amendment, which would have, as we know now, forced states to pay and the federal government to pay for abortions. And at Students for Life, we've been talking about the ERA for the past several years, the dangers of the ERA. This past February, there was another attempt to reprise the ERA. And so this new show is kind of, I think it was intended to be a victory lap. Hollywood was hoping the ERA would be ratified, and still has not been ratified into our Constitution, thankfully. But the show depicts the life of Phyllis Schlafly, how she launched this campaign against the ERA. But what you don't know is they never talked to Phyllis's family. And there's gross inaccuracies that are represented in this show. It's Hollywood doing what Hollywood does best, telling a story that doesn't have to be true. So today, joining me on this live Facebook reaction is Ann Schlafly Corey, Phyllis Schlafly's daughter. Ann is the president of Eagle Forum. You'll also see her depicted as a little girl in Mrs. America, which aired today on Hulu. And then also joining me is Colleen Holcomb. Colleen is the former executive director of Eagle Forum and now serves on its board of directors. Welcome, Colleen and Ann.
Thank you so much, Kristan, for having us and doing this show. We really appreciate your valuable work.
Well, you know, it's the least I can do. You know, I'm actually staring on my office. I actually have a little eagle painting that Phyllis gave me. I was honored to receive from Eagle Forum right before Phyllis passed away. She was a good friend and mentor, and it saddens me to see what Hollywood's attempting to do to your mom and what they're attempting to do to your family, Ann.
You hit on the key word, mentor, and that is what she was. And I'm afraid this movie shows her as cold, cruel, icy, calculating, kind of a mommy dearest figure. And mentor was what she really was, because she inspired so many women like you to get up, get out, get involved, and start your own organizations. I know of so many women who are doing what they're doing today because Phyllis Schlafly encouraged them.
That's right. And she really busted open those doors for women. And as someone who studies, history and social movements, I find the show, the good things I liked about the show was the music. I loved a lot of the actors and actresses in the show. I recognize a lot of folks. And I loved kind of the showing the behind the scenes grassroots activism, which Eagle Forum pioneered, that Phyllis and her band of housewives, went to the state capitol with jam and bread to lobby elected.
It's really true. It's really true. And I don't know if you caught it, and this was the actual tag they used, from the bread makers to the breadwinners.
Yep. That's awesome. So, Colleen, can you share with us kind of I know we were talking before we went live, you already watched some of the episodes. What's your initial reaction of the show?
Well, thank you, Kristan. It's so good to be with you again. And I sure appreciate it. I know Phyllis loved you so much. And one of my last memories of her was getting to watch her play with your daughter. So, yeah. But the show, it was really sad to me. It was sad as someone who got to know and love Phyllis to see someone who was doing a pretty good impression of her voice.
Yes,
and of
very
her,
good.
And as Anne has pointed out, had her hairstyle and had her pearls and her lovely dress down, but was not the Phyllis that we know. That's right. As Anne pointed out, Phyllis was not. She was. Kate Blanchett's portrayal is of a woman smirking. Phyllis never smirked. She smiled. She smiled because she was genuinely happy.
Colleen, I think they show her as condescending to her supporters.
And it never occurred to her that any of the volunteers couldn't do exactly what she did, even though they might have considered themselves just housewives, or maybe people who didn't have college degrees or a Harvard degree like she did. She empowered those women, and it just never occurred to her that they couldn't do exactly what she did. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was very sad, and I thought it was a very sexist portrayal of.
Absolutely.
It was girl fighting and mean girls, and that's not who Phyllis was. There was a scene where they show a fight within the Eagle Forum organization. Eagles never had time to fight; they had too much to do.
Well, right? I think it's very interesting how they're trying to portray Phyllis as an Uncle Tom. And this is what's happened to every woman ever who's objected to the feminist liberal, platform, abortion on demand for any reason, is that you somehow are betraying, your own kind, your own womankind. And I think that they were attempting to do that because they're at the first episode showing sort of Phyllis having to deal with, asking her husband to sign the credit card application and, trying to, stir up like, wow, she's a victim here. But Phyllis never was a victim. Never gave in to victim ideology. Like never, I never heard any woe is me. I can't believe I can't do this because I'm a woman. She never saw her sex, her gender as a limiting factor in anything. I mean, I don't know what you guys have to think about.
I think she saw it as an empowering factor. Exactly. I think she thought it enabled her to do things that others might not be able to do. And she, if a door closed on her, I never heard about it. She found another door to open up.
Yeah. And I think what Colleen, we were saying is they kind of portrayed her in a sexist way. We see this sometimes, where if a female candidate is running for office and there'll be, rumors about how aggressive that female candidate or elected official is, or how that person might treat their staff. But then you go, well, look, how does the man treat their staff, or how does the man act, or whatever. But there's always like a double standard of, well, this is what women, and this is a show supposed to be about feminism, but then they're attacking her for being a leader, for being strategic, for making strategic decisions. And that somehow is cold and calculating. And it's, bitchy.
And Kristan, they have to blame my father for doing it. That she was somehow a puppet of Fred Schlafly. And you brought up the credit card thing. Well, the way my father and mother worked the family finances is my father made the money and turned it all over to my mother to spend. I mean, there was never.
That sounds good.
He had total confidence in her managing and running the family budget, and there never would have been a scene of, I have to sign. It just wouldn't have happened because she ran the money in the household.
Anne, we were talking about this earlier, and you said because both your mother and father have passed away, there's no legal recourse here. But how do you feel about what Hollywood and how Hollywood's portraying your father, especially in that first episode where, there's like this sex scene and Phyllis says she's tired and he says, basically, I don't care. And she kind of just, lets him do his thing and gets up and goes back to taking our contact.
And is happy about it. It shows my father as an insensitive brute. It shows him as, directing her in ways. And what I think it misses, and I go to Colleen's part about this being sexist, they really had a intellectual partnership. He was not condescending towards her, and she was not manipulative towards him. They were a partnership fully, and I think one of the reasons why my mother thought that marriage was a wonderful deal for women, that marriage was good and marriage was something to strive for and marriage was something to work at, was because her marriage was so successful and so happy. And in the end, one of the other things that they show in this movie is that sex seems more fun outside of marriage than it is inside of marriage. And, the nice thing about married women is that we do get more sex, we get more money, we get more security, and we have a date every single Saturday night.
And we actually have better sex. The Huffington Post has actually written about this, that religious married couples have more sex and reports have the most satisfying sex amongst anyone. So, it's exactly what...
Isn't forever love more satisfying than free love?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So how do you, Colleen, there was a couple, I was kind of shocked how quickly they got into abortion because when, Anne and I have written, and Anne's been fighting against ERA since she was a child, essentially. Students for Life has been speaking out against the ERA. And the case that we've been making at Students for Life is this is the Everything Related to Abortion Act. This is a Trojan horse for abortion. We were mocked on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives this spring when they tried again to repass and say that the 1982 time limit on the ERA didn't matter. We were mocked for saying that. And they said, these are alarmists. They're just trying to use abortion. But here, Hollywood has done us a favor and has said right out there, right from the beginning, ERA, all about abortion. I was surprised. I was like, did they even talk to the pro-abortion movement before they went to town on this? Because if I was a pro-abortion activist, I think I'd be upset that my whole agenda has been exposed.
That's right. I know there are a lot of, Republican women and men here in Virginia who said, did the same thing, mocked us and said, ERA has nothing to do with abortion. The same thing that they said. That's right. The same thing they said to you on the floor of the House of Representatives. And we know that was the key reason that they wanted ERA passed. And I know that you mentioned that was one of the key motivators for Phyllis and for your father, that was one of the reasons that they were so motivated to fight against the Equal Rights Amendment.
Yes, and that's what, in the movie, showing this contentious marriage between my parents misses the real fact of it that my father considered abortion to be the single most important issue of his time. And when my mother would go out and give a speech and come back, he would say, "You didn't talk enough about abortion." That really, it was, he thought, compelling on in fighting ERA.
So, and they did the same thing with the bathroom issue. They brought up the issue of single-sex bathrooms as if
I was like, that's what we have now.
Happened, and here we are. So yes, you're right. Hollywood's making our point for us.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, and it showed that got so much wrong. They did get that right, and I think probably it's because whoever, the script writer and the producers, they're aligned with the abortion agenda, so they don't see anything wrong, and they're not reading the talking points that the political left is putting out, trying to cover up the fact that the ERA is all about abortion. And so I think this show kind of just blows the lid on that and exposes that what we've been saying all along is true. This is a Trojan horse. This is what their full intention is taxpayer-funded abortions in all 9 months of pregnancy. How did you feel, Colleen? There wasn't really a pro-life voice represented. You didn't even hear Phyllis talking about, why she opposed abortion. How do you feel that they did talking about abortion? Because I did find a kind of a hidden pro-life message, which I don't think they thought was going to be pro-life.
You're right. I think you hit on it as we were talking earlier. You see Gloria Steinem remembering the experience of having her own illegal abortion, and then she was talking to a woman who's crying about having an abortion. Mm-hmm. And you're exactly right. So often they tell our story for us. That's a more powerful depiction of the reality of abortion, the woman crying. And
yeah, I mean, the woman was using the talking points of, I'm married, I just I couldn't afford my baby, so my husband and I decided to pay someone to end my child's life. But yet she's showing remorse and she's sad, which is, if abortion's so great, why are you crying?
Right.
Why haven't you told anybody? Why is she keeping it a secret? So, we did hear, Anne, that kind of tired old talking point that, the back alley abortions, women dying from these at-home abortions, which we actually know statistically was not correct. Planned Parenthood's own acclaimed statistician, Christopher Tietz, debunked that in the 60s, and even their former Planned Parenthood medical director, Mary Calderon, debunked it in the late 50s, that women weren't dying in the thousands because of illegal abortions before Roe versus Wade. This was some women did die, and they exploited those women for their political gain.
I also thought the political ramifications of this issue in 1972 that they discussed were very interesting. The very liberal Democratic nominee, George McGovern, did not want to make abortion part of his campaign. And he didn't because the senator from Missouri, Tom Eagleton, had said there are the 3 A's that will kill the Democratic abortion, which kill the Democratic nominee, which are abortion, amnesty, and acid. Well, some issues, never leave on the Democratic Party. And so it shows Gloria Steinem saying, if I'm going to lead this movement, the Democratic Party has to be pro-abortion. And I thought that was a fascinating insight.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we have today, right? The DNC the Democratic platform is officially now calling for taxpayer-funded abortions. They, in 2016, they even went so far as to strip that out to see how far the abortion industry has gone. But yet, if you think about I was watching some of the scenes in Mrs. America, and you think about, how quote unquote far they've gone with abortion rights, but then think that really hasn't solved women's problems. You still have grabby politicians. Women still deal with real issues of racism and having to deal with men kind of poo-pooing their ideas or setting them aside, or women judging them on their looks. Because Gloria Steinem, her funder in the first episode comments that, she got her first job because of her great legs, which we know still happens today. But yet abortion doesn't solve any of these problems.
Well, and now abortion is legal and women are still dying and women are still being butchered. And what are the feminists doing? They're fighting to repeal the regulations that would keep abortion.
Okay, but I got to talk about the grabby politicians. Yeah. Because they make a lot of that in the first scene. Now, first of all, my mother didn't approve of bikinis, never wore a bikini.
I was wondering about that.
That is not possible. Second of all, my mother did not approve of kissing men who were not her husband. And she never kissed, hugged, touched men who were not her husband. So it wouldn't have happened that they show this congressman, kissing her every time he saw her. It would not have happened. Because she always said, it was kind of cute. She said, after I got married, no man ever made another pass at me again. And it's because she wouldn't let it, because she never got herself in situations where that could happen. So the idea that she would have had dinner with a man who was not her husband, not possible. My mother believed in the Pence rule. You never dine with a man who's not your husband.
Yeah, and I can test that. I mean, I was out to dinners with Phyllis, and I remember one of our supporters, our shared supporters, years and years ago, and he would go to hug her and she would shake his hand. Phyllis did, and they were,
Oh, she was also worried it might mess her makeup.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, they were both in their late 80s. I think he was in the beginning. There wasn't anything that was going to happen. What else, and from the show? I mean, what else are some of the stunning kind of inaccuracies that folks really need to know about?
Well, they try to make this idea that Phyllis was opposed to single, never married women. Mm-hmm. And they portray my Aunt Eleanor as a sad sack wallflower. And, well, first of all, Eleanor was a vivacious social woman who had a ton of boyfriends and ran her own organization. But she's kind of presented as doing my family's laundry, which would have been inconceivable for Eleanor, because she was so, I mean, she was dramatic. I mean, she was a force of nature on her own. But the idea that she disagreed with Phyllis because of this sort of single woman, single women would have a different opinion, belies who many of the early Eagles were. And I started to calculate and think about all my mother's supporters who were never married, single women who were passionate on the cause, passionate, yes, on abortion, but also passionate on the rights of women and preserving the rights of women. Some of her best lieutenants were not married women, and I think the program does a disservice to them.
Mm-hmm. Colleen, what did you see? No, you worked with Phyllis for several years. That was just stunning inaccuracy, because some of it, I mean, Cate Blanchett is a talented actress, and there's a reason she is a critically acclaimed. I mean, some of her mannerisms of Phyllis you can tell she's studied public appearances and speeches.
She did. She clearly did a lot of studying, and some of the words she said made me miss Phyllis and think Phyllis is in the room. But then you look at her eyes and look at the way she treats people and look at the way her general demeanor, and you say, that is not Phyllis. It was really sad to see the way that Phyllis was portrayed as jealous. Phyllis would have gotten a call about ERA not being ratified in Oklahoma. She would have thrown a party. She would have been so thrilled.
You are so right. That scene was terrible. I mean, she would have. I mean, she was always supportive of her lieutenants, and she was so proud that they could defeat ERA just on the basis of a newsletter.
She was. She was so proud of them, and so you're right. She would have been extremely. She was never self-promoting. In fact, she empowered the other women. Also, there's a scene where she tells one woman, well, public speaking isn't as easy as it looks. There's a trick to making it look easy. They depict Phyllis as being so condescending. You're right, Anne. And she was never condescending. In fact, like I said earlier, she knew all of these women were perfectly capable, and she equipped the volunteers who showed up. They wanted her to come speak, and she said, no, you go speak. Here are the talking points. Here's how you hold yourself. Don't speak too long. And she would tell
and what she would do, and I don't know if you were aware of this, Kristan, but she used to have these training sessions where she'd set up a video camera and tape her lieutenants practicing their speech, and then she would help them shape it so that they would get it just right. And to say, you can only speak in 3 minutes because no one's going to listen to you after 3 minutes, so that they would get all their points in the right amount. And she would give advice on how to present yourself on TV so you could do the best. So the lieutenant that she is condescending to in the show is Rosemary Thompson, who was from Illinois and was a powerhouse in her own right. She wrote a number of books, and she was no wallflower to Phyllis. I can assure you that. I mean, they had, Phyllis and her eagles talked freely about the issues with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we know just from Eagle Forum's programs, the Collegian Summit, and all the work that Eagle Forum and Phyllis's organization still does today, clearly is about empowering grassroots, pro-life, conservative women and men, if they want, to be involved and to get active in the process. And I think that's one of the great lessons we can take from what Phyllis was able to do. We were able to get this one woman, this one homemaker, was able to mobilize this entire army, and then she immobilized thousands across the United States, and her legacy still carries on today. I did think one of the things they did get right, another thing they got right, besides kind of depicting the tragedy of abortion, and they picked some really great actresses and music. I thought it was interesting how they also depicted the feminist movement. So Gloria Steinem and their arrogant, their arrogant attitude towards stay-at-home mothers, towards women who didn't want to be a part of their movement. Their song at their rally, "Move over or we'll move on," or like, "We'll move over on you." I mean, it was very revolutionary. And Steinem says at one point of, well, there's casualties in every revolution, of really have just showing how focused they were on eliminating that the homemaker role and devaluing that role in our society.
Well, and they had quote, Brenda Feiston is saying, "We are against housewives." Imagine that.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable, especially in time right now with coronavirus, and we're all at home and we're all housewives
now.
Yeah, we're all house husbands.
Yeah, right.
I think a lot of working moms right now are probably getting a dose of what it would be like to be a homeschooling mom and working, and the challenges. And I think there's going to be, if you could have done polling of appreciation of homeschooling or homemaker mothers before coronavirus and after, I think you would see a significant jump, because that's what, my kind of Facebook friends are all kind of giving out, like, tips for how to manage and how to deal and how to de-stress at the end of the day, because so many women have never stayed at home with their children and had to figure out how to organize schedules and all of that. I work from home, so I get the worst of both worlds and the best of both worlds at times.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
Holly, are there any other takeaways from the movie that we should be talking about? Inaccuracies, things they got right, things that we hope maybe they will cover in future episodes?
Well, it makes me wonder, Anne, you mentioned the acrimony that was so fictitiously presented in the show In Your Parents' Marriage, and they presented acrimony in Eagle Forum too, which makes me wonder how much of the acrimony that they're presenting on the feminist side is real, because I know it was completely fictitious as it relates to Eagle Forum. Eagle Forum has always been a remarkably drama-free organization, for an organization of women, and particularly women who are strong-willed, strong personalities, brilliant, from different faiths. We have a lot of diversity among different faiths, but it's an organization that has gotten along extremely well. And the idea that there was fighting from the beginning and that there were power struggles from the beginning really misses the point of what a tremendous leader Phyllis was. And Phyllis was, to say that she was followed is not an exaggeration. And she wasn't followed because she was a megalomaniac or because she demanded it. She was followed because she had so much integrity, because she was such a powerful leader, and because she was so empowering of others. Eagles would come together and they would do anything, including sacrifice time with their families, which was the most important thing on earth for these women. But Phyllis impressed on them the importance of getting out of the home to make sure that they could defend the home by going and talking to the leaders in their state houses. And they did it, and they succeeded. And just, I think, Kristan, you mentioned the kind of the unwitting pro-life message. I think the most important pro-life message comes out of the notion that Gloria Steinem's doctor told her, they made the point that now go do whatever you want with your life, and that it was necessary to have an abortion to be able to go do what you want with your life. But she failed. Ultimately, her efforts failed, where Phyllis had 6 children, and apparently we know it wasn't true, but according to them, an oppressive husband, but she succeeded.
That's right. What else? Quickly before we kind of wrap up, what did you make? I haven't finished the third episode, but there's kind of an allude to the fact that Phyllis is racist, and that and so I really think we need to talk about that. I mean, we've heard this before. We've heard horrible Phyllis. I mean, Phyllis was not a stranger to be called nasty names and these fabrications, but what can we be saying to push back against that? Because a lot of us, for me, I wasn't living in the 1970s, so I wasn't there in the room.
Well, Anne just did an excellent article, and I would encourage everyone to check it out on Eagle Forum Engage. And sorry to talk for you, Anne, but Anne made the point that when you disagree, it's a tactic to falsely accuse people with whom you disagree. And it happened to Phyllis throughout her activism. But I would encourage anybody who'd like to investigate that claim to read The Sweetheart of the Silent Majority, which was a biography that was written about Phyllis by a woman who was herself a pro-ERA feminist, who was very, very honest in the prologue to that book, saying, I really didn't want to, but I found myself liking Phyllis. And her name is
Carol Felsenauer.
And she was talking about how she was so bummed to have to publish this scandal-free article about Phyllis because she just couldn't find any. As she put it, she even said something like a stain on her character would have been dandy. And at one point, Betty Friedan held a press conference accusing Stop ERA of accepting money from the John Birch Society and the Ku Klux Klan. And Felsenauer was saying she was really excited. And Phyllis said, well, I'm glad I let Ms. Friedan investigate me. She's not going to find anything, and it'll keep her out of mischief. And Felsenauer said, well, she got the last word as always, because it came to nothing. It was true. There was there were no donations. And there was also an allegation that Phyllis had tried to stop a local Y in the area where she lived from being integrated. And Felsenauer really tracked down. She did a lot of work and tried to track down, find the facts out about that accusation, and found out from 3 sources who were all Phyllis opponents, ERA supporters, and they had to sheepishly admit, sorry, Phyllis was no racist. So this is no new accusation, but it is a false accusation. And I think it's particularly lazy and unfortunate that the producers who are claiming to bring some authenticity to the discussion about this debate would go back to the same tired, disproven false accusation.
Yeah.
It's important to remember about the Ku Klux Klan. They were an arm of the Democratic Party. My mother was always a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no possible way she ever could have had any connection with the KKK.
And what else? Is there anything else that we need to know, or you want folks to know about the inaccuracies in Mrs. America? Maybe some of your hopes for future episodes, or just about your family, about your mom. You had an incredible mother and an incredible father, and what a great legacy they've left you. And that you're leading now with Eagle Forum and carrying on your mom's mission. But what else do you want folks to know, especially younger, pro-lifers or conservatives? What else should they know? Who maybe folks who never got to meet Phyllis, like I did.
Well, I think they try to present her as not really a homemaker, and I think it's important to put in context some of the allegations that they're doing. So they show that she, brings her widowed mother into the home because the widowed mother is broke and can't afford to live on her own. Because she was, she didn't get her husband didn't provide for her. They try to make this specious argument about my grandmother. In truth, my grandmother had dementia and could not possibly live on her own. And my grandmother did live with us for 10 years because she had Alzheimer's. And then on the other, so that was one 10-year block of my mother's life. And then another 10-year block was my mother caring for my father, who also had dementia and Alzheimer's in the last 10 years of his life. And I think those caregiving roles that women, they're not forced to do it. They choose to do it because they love these people. And that's what gets missed in this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it does such a disservice, and it's kind of this tired old argument we hear from the feminist movement of if you're a pro-life woman or a conservative woman, they attack you on everything. It just drives me up a wall, because here you have this woman who, Phyllis broke those glass ceilings. I mean, she led this movement. She did something in history that's never been done. And so you would think she would be an icon of the feminist movement, but because she has different views on issues, she is the arch nemesis of the feminist movement. But really, if you're being honest, you should be able to look at Phyllis's life, the fact that she was able to have children, have a good marriage, take care of her mother, and lead a movement. She did do all of those things, and it has sacrifice, because as we know, as moms and as women, there's always sacrifice of trade one thing for another. But she was able to have it all and do it all as much as she could, knowing that there are sacrifices and trade-offs whenever you do something and you're not at home, or you're at home and you're not in DC. I certainly face it, and I know, Anne, you certainly have faced it, trying to balance it all. And I think that, to be honest with you, that's the number one question I always get from young women all the time is, how do I balance it all? And the feminist movement says you can have it all, but they never talk about the actual minutia and the details of how do you actually have it?
I think we learned from the show how to have it all, because we learned from Gloria Steinem how to have it all. Well, you have to get an abortion.
Yeah, and I think that's so tragic, and that those talking points they use and the rhetoric that Gloria uses in Mrs. America is the saying that we hear is, you can have it all, but you have to kill your child, or you have to pay someone else to dismember another human being in order for you to live your life and achieve whatever you want to achieve. And Phyllis Schlafly and her life proved the exact opposite, that you don't have to kill your child. You don't have to give in to this culture of death talking points, that you can be a wife, you can be a mother, and you can be an activist. And it's not without sacrifice, but it can be done. Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Colleen, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I hope we were able to kind of clear the air for folks, especially younger pro-lifers or conservatives who might be tuning in. And it's like I said, it's great Hollywood actors and actresses, great music, great cinematography, but just watch, because the facts aren't right. So hopefully you'll do your own homework and research. But thank you, ladies, for joining me, and thank you for all the work that Eagle Forum continues to do across our country. And I look forward to fighting the ERA with you, the Everything Related Abortion Act, and hopefully making sure it never comes up ever again.
Well, they don't come up with new ideas, Kristan. They just repackage the old ones.
That's absolutely true.
That's
absolutely
right.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Kristan. So nice to be with you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.